thank you for joining us for the Creating Mental Wealth Show. My name is Sherry James. I am your host, and I have a celebrity as my guest today. So I had the opportunity of meeting Robert Grigore. He is EMDR specialist to the stars. And so we'll talk a little bit about EMDR, what it is, how amazing it is when it comes to creating and maintaining mental wealth. So let's get started. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Sherry. Thanks so much for having me here. And that's a very kind intro.
I mean, I have to make it exciting,
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, first of all, let's just start because not everyone knows. What is EMDR?
Yeah. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And as you can tell, that's a mouthful. So we just use the acronym EMDR. Essentially what it is, it's an accelerated neurological type of therapy where we're actually utilizing the brain's natural capacity for forming new neural connections called neuroplasticity. And we're accelerating that by a process called bilateral stimulation, which utilizes both hemispheres of the brain in alternating fashion and really facilitates growth and healing at a much faster rate than normal, but it's still very much a natural healing process.
I love it. I love it. We had the opportunity to have a conversation several weeks ago, and I was floored by some of the advances that you've kind of made in this space. So tell us a little bit about you particularly. Why do you do this work? And tell us about, specifically what you do when it comes to EMDR.
Yeah, so why I specialized in EMDR was particularly, I started off my career as a talk therapist, and I did all of the things that a talk therapist will do, and I held great space for my clients. The thing was I was working with an extremely traumatized population, so male survivors of sexual abuse. And I loved my work, and I had a great time with my clients, but after several years of going back through almost, it seemed like the same thing over and over and over again, I was starting to get burnt out. My clients were starting to get burnt out. It felt like trying to take down a redwood tree with a spoon. And as you can imagine, that took quite a while to do that.
Right.
So I remembered in my graduate education, I wrote this little acronym EMDR in the notepad of in the margin of my notepad. And I thought maybe I'll try that. I went for a training. Right off the bat, I thought it was absolutely bonkers. There was no way this is possibly, going to be real. I could wave my hands and my clients would feel better. I just didn't think that was possible. I almost left actually too, right before the first lunch. And I thought, well, Robert, I'm paying all this money for my training and my credits and everything, then I might as well just keep doing it. So I stayed for the training, best decision ever made for my career, or one of the best decisions ever. And I started trying EMDR with my clients, and 90-minute sessions, maybe 2 or 3 of them for the majority of my clients, suddenly started feeling immediate change. So this is, a client, for example, that, had an abuser. I said, Robert, if I ever saw that, abuser again in my life, I'd do something bad to that, but let's just put it that way.
Right.
And, 3 90-minute sessions, and he goes, Robert, if I saw him in the mall, I could probably have a conversation with him. Like, we wouldn't be friends or anything, but like, right. I could have a conversation with him. Like, wow. So I started getting I dove headfirst into EMDR. I thought, wow, the results are incredible. And then I had a high-profile media celebrity see one of my news clips that I did. She came in to seek help with an addiction. And when she found out that it would take 4 to 6 months or so for us to heal that addiction, she politely got up, she shook my hand, said, Robert, you seem like a nice guy, but that's a little bit too long. I have to go on the air in 4 hours from now. And she left. And that was a pivotal moment for me in growth. And I started thinking, what could I do to speed this up a little bit? And there's some research that some other therapists and researchers have done around the world, showing that extensive EMDR treatments, so longer than the regular 90 minutes or more frequently, could be effective. So I started doing 3 days in a row, 5 hours straight. And I've had incredible results with my clients. And
Right.
the process for me, I'm calling that total immersion EMDR, because it's just really immersing ourselves in that client's life and getting really, really, really fast results at a faster pace than I ever thought possible.
I love it. It's amazing. I know that, I mean, if you think about most things, total immersion works, right? So if you're thinking changing a new language, and you talked about that, right? So it's neural linguistics. It's making sure that your brain is firing differently, and that full-on immersion, it just makes sense. I have had my experiences with EMDR. You and I talked about that on our conversation, and there's so much power there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back from break, because I want to know more about the difference between traditional EMDR and total immersion. I understand the timing is different, but I want to go more into that. I want to know more about it. And then I also want to kind of turn the table a bit and talk about the fact, you have a celebrity or some celebrity clients. What's the difference, right, than just kind of the regular folks like me? I know there's a timing. We want to get it done right away. We've got to be on stage in a couple of hours. But I want to talk when we come back a little bit more about the differences between your celebrity clients and then your regular clients like me. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back talking more about EMDR and totally immersion EMDR. See you in a bit.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.
Welcome back. We are the Creating Mental Wealth Show, and today we are talking about EMDR. And it's a mouthful, and so I'm not going to even attempt to say what it is, but I will allow our amazing guest, Robert Grigore, to tell us a little bit more. Remind us what the acronym stands for again, because I think I blow it every time. So
You're not alone. Most people do. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Wow. Okay.
Try to say that 10 times fast.
No,
right?
thank you. I'll pass. I'll pass. Well, so we've talked a little bit about kind of what EMDR is. We talked about your version of it, the total immersion aspect. And so I said before the break that I wanted to make sure that we talked, a little bit more about what are the differences of the 2 types of EMDR, but also the differences between your celebrity clients and your clients that are, kind of, regular folk. So what are some of the major differences that you see?
Yeah, so just so that everybody knows, so EMDR is an standard 8-phase protocol. And so when we're doing regular, what I call pay-as-you-go sessions, which is 60 minutes, 90 minutes, that sort of thing on a weekly basis. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of people do it, get great results with that as well. It just tends to take a little bit longer, particularly because in the phases, we're going to have to close down the work. So, usually a typical therapy session, you spend maybe 5 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes talking about the week or what's been going on. And then you start to get, into the work. And then at the end of the session, you have about another 5 or 10 minutes to sort of close down, make sure things contain. So with the EMDR, we've got 8 phases: history taking, preparation, which is also stabilization. We're doing assessment, desensitization. We're doing the installation phase, body scan, closure, and then reevaluation the week following or later on in the session as to what we just did to make sure that there was an effective change. There's no sense in doing anything if you don't know if it's working.
Absolutely, right?
So total immersion EMDR, when we're doing longer sessions, I've found with my clients, it allows them to go deeper into what it is that we're working on instead of having to open it up and then close it down, open it up, close it down, open up, close it down. Sometimes with really intense memories of trauma, it can take people 3, 4, 5 sessions to go through that one incident if it's really bad. And I never judge what my clients are going through and compare, but sometimes it's just the way the brain stores the information. It can take longer. So I found that to be incredibly effective for clients to be able to say, hey, we have all day long. We don't need to rush this process. We can do what we need to do and do it right. And, it just that it's space, it's an allowance for them to do what they need to do.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. I will talk about my experience with the EMDR a little later, because I think people will get a kick out of that. So when it comes to your celebrity clients and kind of, your day-to-day clients, what are some of the major changes or differences that you see when delivering this type of therapy?
Well, I remember the first celebrity client I ever worked with, I was like, oh my God, this is so-and-so. And I was a little nervous at first. And what I found very quickly was that they're people. Celebrities are people that just have more eyes watching them. And there are obviously there's some considerable differences in terms of some of the aspects of their work that are challenging, right? I mean, we've seen in the news recently what happens when, people are in the spotlight for an extended period of time, and all of a sudden the world starts to hate one person. Then you start to, then their whole lives are affected.
Right.
So generally speaking, with people that aren't celebrities, who aren't in a spotlight, and I consider athletes, entertainers, CEOs,
Yes.
Maybe people even like yourself. I think you are, you got an audience, right? People are watching you. It's another level of stress for that person to deal with. And so we just have to factor that in. But the brain works the same way. It doesn't matter, if you're homeless or you're a billionaire, the brain still, will be, EMDR will be effective with that brain. It's as much a neurological, medical, physiological sequence as it is, an emotional, even spiritual sequence for some people. So from my experience, celebrities tend to go with very similar things as the regular people. I mean, Sandra Bullock talked about her experience with EMDR and having somebody breaking into her house, PTSD. Mel B had addiction with sex and alcohol. These are stuff that I deal with on a regular basis with people anyway. So who they are doesn't matter to me exactly. It's the fact that they need help, and everybody can use some help from here and there.
Absolutely. And one of the focuses that we make sure that we incorporate in our curriculum is that mental wealth aspect. We all have the capacity of being mentally wealthy, and I see EMDR as one of those mental wealth deposits. I know that that's something that I can add to my toolkit to make my portfolio diverse. Now say that 10 times fast.
No, thanks.
No, don't do it. But I do want to talk a little bit about the freedom that comes on the other side of EMDR, right? And so in my experience, I was dealing with, a very traumatic situation, and the same thing. It looked like regular therapy just wasn't working. I could still very much feel and smell and taste that experience. And I remember telling you the story that when I went through my first session of EMDR, I was in a building with quite a few people. And when I finally was able to release this trauma, all the power went out in the entire building, right? And so I remember walking out and everyone's like, oh my gosh, did you do that? I'm like, of course I did that. I have the power of doing that. But we did talk a little bit about, the power that our brains hold, right? And so and we didn't go into quantum physics because you told me that we couldn't, but let's talk about that, like the energy that our brain uses to compress or store or protect us from some of our traumatic memories.
Yeah. From my understanding, I mean, the brain's, incredibly powerful, and what I've seen people go through and recover, and the energy it takes for many clients to hold something at bay and not go there for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Right. And sometimes for some, never. It's an incredible amount of energy that's going into, keeping that system locked up, if you will.
Yeah.
And, the way that neural synapses work is, energy potentials go from one to the other, and there's a spark, and then there's I'm not a neurosurgeon myself or neurologist, but there's a lot that's going on in the brain where there's the chemical reaction stuff, and since being a little kid, I was always wondering what happens to that energy potential once it goes. Like, where does it go?
Right. Yeah.
Like, because I know energy can't be created or destroyed. It's got to go somewhere.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I just, I turned all the power out in the building. So,
Yeah.
It's the same. I don't know. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what happens on the other side of EMDR, what it looks like when you've had a successful session or a few. And we'll also talk more about where we can find you. So we'll see you back here in a moment.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.
Welcome back to the Creating Mental Wealth shows. We're talking today about EMDR, and we've got a special guest today, Robert Grigore. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens on the other side. So let's talk about what success looks like, Robert. After I've completed my sessions of EMDR, whether total immersion or standard, what does that look like? How do you then coach your clients after they've released this trauma that they may have held on to for 10, 20 or more years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's a couple different answers to that. So number one, I'll talk about what happens when the client's issue isn't completely resolved, but they're getting better each time that we have a session. So I heard an analogy many years ago, I think from Tal Kroitru in Israel. She talked about, if I have 10 pins on my hand or my foot, and I take out 1 pin, each pin represents a trauma, I'm going to feel marginally better, but I still have, 9 other pins in my foot. And so I'm not going to feel totally free and clear until all 10 of those pins are gone. So that's something I always tell clients, especially if they're really complicated in what they're dealing with, or if we have to do pay as you go or that sort of thing, that we're not going to get it all done in one shot. Right. But if we do get it all done, whenever that is, and sometimes my weekend can do that for clients, your life will change dramatically. And I talk about the individual existing within a system. So their spouse, if they have one, children, if they have them, work, every system that person's a part of, when they're changing that one part of the system, the whole system becomes stressed a little bit and changes. So I often talk to my client about, what's at stake if you do get better, right? And it's an important question to ask, because a lot of times people don't think about, what they're hanging on to that might, still benefit them to some degree.
Right.
But we're talking about, dramatic changes. So somebody that's, phobic of flying or spiders or crowds, they're no longer phobic of those things anymore. And they can actually go and do those things that they wanted to do. And then they're opening themselves up to a whole new world, right? Imagine having a fear of public speaking and no longer being able to, you can do that without ever questioning it.
Right.
PTSD is gone, right? You're no longer walking around scared of, life. So we're talking about total belief change. So if you believe the world was dangerous, that you're not safe, that you're not worthy, that you aren't good enough, that you have to be perfect, or something else will happen. And those things are changed completely to, have full confidence in yourself. I believe that I'm worthy of love. I believe that, the world is safe with me in it. I can protect myself. These are major changes that people have to actually get used to. So
yeah.
After we're done, I help people along, adopting that into their world.
Yeah, one of our earlier episodes, we had Dr. Stacia Alexander, and she talked about the emotionality of success and how a lot of times our families and our groups of people that are in our lives aren't prepared for us to be successful. In this case, even mentally, so, right? And because now you are doing different things. And if I was afraid of public speaking and now I can't shut up, my friends and family would be like, what is going on? Like, we like the old Sherry better. Can we bring her back? And so her episode, we talked a lot about what happens as we become more wealthy, when we have more of something. In this case, when it's mental health, we do need to make sure that our families and our support systems are aware of these changes, right? And they know that you are growing in this way. It's very important to make sure that you're successful. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And sometimes I've found people in that person's life, some people in that person's life will go along for the ride. You know, it's an upward trend and they're with you. But then some people just can't make the adjustment. And so those relationships naturally start to change, sometimes disintegrate altogether. But the important thing is that the individual, the client, feels very comfortable with those changes, and it's a choice that they can make or allow themselves to live guilt-free of any changes that are happening in that realm. So it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment to live well. I guess I make the choice. You know, do you want to live well, or you want to live, unwell? I mean, you're making a choice either way.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's options out there. So it's just whatever the person decides that they want to do. And of course, there's all kinds of professionals out there that can help transition that person into this new level of being.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to make sure that I state, we have a lot of different guests on this show, and we talk about different tools and techniques, and it's never an and or, right? It's an and, right?
Yeah.
It is in addition to. And so I know that we are used to having our conversations with our therapist, hopefully, and if not, we need to be. We're trying to normalize that conversation. But I think if people have had maybe bad experiences with traditional therapy, or they have not seen the kind of results with traditional therapy, EMDR becomes another option. It becomes something else, like I said, that you could put in your toolkit, but it's never one or the other, right? It's usually a plan. And of course, I've got that project management background in my head, like there's a plan. You start here and you move from this phase to this one. And then sometimes, because healing is not linear, sometimes you go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage -4, right? And then, so the fact that it's not linear, I want to make sure that people understand that that is what mental wealth is. It's understanding that it's not a linear process. It's not the same for everyone, and that different tools can be utilized at different stages of your healing to create that mental wealth. And like you said, if our families feel it, then they become more mentally wealthy, the people that they deal with. And so I'm praying for this ripple effect of a paradigm shift. So tell us, before we go, I want to know, how do we find you? Who would your kind of ideal client be? How would they find you, and how do they engage your services?
Yeah, I work, thanks. I work with a lot of, busy professionals. Some are, elite, CEOs, C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, celebrities, of course. But also, management positions, supervisors, coaches, executive coaches. Those are sort of the types of people I tend to see. Essentially, professions where there's little to zero margin for error. A doctor, if they make a mistake, if they're a surgeon, somebody dies. Right. So there's a lot of pressure there. So those are who I really excel in working with. And so my website's thecelebritysavior.com. You can find lots of information about me there. But I love when people connect with me on LinkedIn. It's my favorite. Just connect with me, send me a message, tell me where you heard about me or you're introduced to me, and just drop me a note, and I'd love to have a quick conversation that way. I also do roundtable conversations weekly, where you can ask me anything you want about EMDR, and there's lots of different options. So easiest way, connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a message, just say hi.
I love it. I love it. And LinkedIn has kind of become our new go-to now, right? That's kind of where we're connecting and meeting. That's where we met and how we connected. So yes. Definitely kudos for that. And before we go, I just want to kind of remind everyone why we do the work that we do, right? So we are making sure that we are creating this paradigm shift, because therapy, though we know is how important it is, people still don't really want to talk about it. People always have this kind of perception of what it is. And so we believe that if we can have this paradigm shift and talk about creating mental wealth, it's something that people go, wait, did you mean to say health? Like, no, we actually wealth. We know that we can build this and pass it on to our children. And I know you've got some babies there at home. And so hopefully by the time they understand, they can watch the show and say, of course, we're already mentally wealthy. We got it. We figured it out because Robert's got it. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you for zooming in with us. I love the work that you're doing. Please let us know how we can help support you. Again, Robert Grigore, the Celebrity EMDR guy. Thanks for spending time with us at the Creating Mental Wealth Show.
Thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to stay home with my babies and not have to fly. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you and this whole mission that you're on. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you soon. All right, thanks guys for joining in for this episode of the Creating Mental Wealth Show. We will see you soon. Keep saving lives.